Welcome to Under the Rug at Work, where we shine light on things that are normally swept under the rug. Today, I'm chatting with Lisa George about why return to office mandates fail. Lisa is the remote team queen and the founder and CEO of Momentum OT. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm really excited about this topic because it's happening more and more, and you see it obviously way more than I do. And
Mm.
um, it does set organizations and people up to fail. But before we jump into it, can you share a little bit about your journey and what led you to become the remote team queen?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me once again. And it's my privilege to share with you today. Yeah, my journey with working remotely really started back at the beginning of the turn of the century, which is quite a long time ago now.
It is.
Before working remotely was a cool thing. I actually, in the year 2000, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was only 27 at the time, which was quite rare back then.
Mm.
But at that time, I was working for a major corporate insurance company, and that was quite beneficial in lots of ways because I were able to support my journey with breast cancer. But also, it gave me that realization that I didn't want to be working in a structure where I had to commute every day. I think when you've had that sort of health scare, life and the purpose of life really gets sharply into focus,
Our
and you
priorities
start to
shift.
question everything, I think. And shortly after I finished my treatment with breast cancer, my mum passed away suddenly, and I think that really just reinforced to me that there was more
Mm.
to life than work, and
Yeah.
that in order for me to have an appropriate level of blend, I like to call it blend, not balance, because I think balance is hard to achieve. But that work-life blend just wasn't open to me at that time. Back in those days, I can say that, that, it just wasn't the done thing. And I did ask for flexible working arrangements, and it was basically declined.
Mm.
It was full-time or nothing.
Yeah.
And so I decided to set up myself in my garage in southwest Sydney,
Mhm.
and work remotely as a contractor. But then I realized that there were a whole lot of other health professionals who weren't working, they were at home raising children, because their employers weren't offering them flexibility. So there was
Mm.
this whole cohort of professional people, whether it be women or men, mainly women back then,
Mm.
that were unable to engage in the workforce because their employers weren't willing to offer flexibility around their other life responsibilities and roles.
Yeah.
And as an OT, I've got a fairly holistic view on life, and I decided that wasn't really a good thing for anyone. The community and the world was missing out on the expertise of those professional people, and they were missing out on delivering and progressing professionally. And so I offered them contract arrangements, and they were working from home. And then it sort of just grew, to a team of 30 professionals, all working from home, all distributed. And over those years, I've had to learn how to lead that team, and develop this sense of team culture, despite the fact that we're not located in the same place at the same time. And then COVID hit, and everyone thought, oh, we have to all work from home. What a surprise. And they didn't know how to do it. Leaders didn't know how to lead it well, and people who work from home didn't know how to be productive and work effectively in a remote setting. So I decided that I would bundle up my experience and my thought leadership in this space and write a white paper. And
Mhm.
then that was released. And now I mentor, train, speak on all things remote, hybrid, distributed workforces and the future of work.
I love it. I love it. And I love how you said the turn of the century.
It seems so long ago, but it's gone very fast.
It, it really it doesn't though. The 80s was only like 20 years ago, right?
I know, I know. I'm sure I still feel like I'm that girl. in lots of ways. But
Yes.
no, time has marched on, and I'm now 52, and we are no longer in the 80s. So
We're not.
it's a shock to the system.
I'm sorry to hear about your health scare and really happy to hear that you're well and healthy.
Yes,
Uh,
thank you.
but something like that, it really does shift our priorities, right?
Mm,
Well, it
mm,
shows us what our priorities are.
absolutely.
And I think COVID did the same thing. While there were a lot
Mm,
of things that weren't done well and a lot of really negative things that came out of it, the positive part was, hey, we need to spend time with family. We need to have that balance. We need to not spend life commuting. And we are now 5 years on
mm.
from that shift, but people are now starting to try and force it back to what it was. Why do you think so many businesses are still treating either hybrid or work from home as a temporary fix instead of BAU?
Mm. I mean, I think COVID did throw us into a rather extraordinary situation where it was introduced in such a fashion. It was en masse, and it was spontaneous, and there weren't opportunities for appropriate preparation for
Mm,
everyone to be able to implement it in a way that was totally effective. So I guess we've had this flawed experience in lots of ways, and I think it's put a little bit of a black mark against the experience. And so people have just thought, well, it doesn't work. Let's go back to the way things were, because things worked then, and this clearly didn't work. It was like a big social experiment that just went pear-shaped. And
mm,
so now people are wanting to pull everyone back. But the problem is, people have sort of moved on. They've adapted their lives around working flexibly,
yeah.
and they don't want to go back to the way things were. And they've proven in lots of ways and in lots of situations and in lots of workplaces that it can be done,
Mm,
and you can still be productive and effective when working remotely.
mhm,
But I think as leaders, if anything, this experience of leading remotely has shone a light on a massive skill gap,
mm,
a leadership gap. If anything, remote work has become a bit of a mirror.
yeah.
And I think that's where the tendency is to pull everyone back to the office, because that's where leaders feel comfortable. That's
Mm,
where leaders feel in control. And learning how to do things differently is in the hard basket. It's too much effort, too much of a problem. Um, I
mm,
can't be bothered, and really I'm the boss, so I'm just going to pull everyone back where I can see what's going on, and everything can just go back to the way it was.
mm,
Unfortunately, um, that has a negative message to the workforce,
mhm.
and just leads to presenteeism, really,
Yeah.
which isn't effective or productive, not morale boosting at all,
Mhm.
and has lots of negative consequences.
Yes. And just because you're seeing someone doesn't mean they're doing their best work.
Mm-mm. And I've worked in a massive office, and I've seen it.
Mhm.
Even 25 years ago, it was happening, and I'm sure nothing is new under the sun. If someone doesn't work when they're right in front of your face, they're not going to work anywhere. Like I mean, we have all seen it.
Yes.
The professional productivity theatre, I think they call it now.
Yep.
Uh, everything's got a name now. But yeah, which is quite funny. But when you think about it, it is actually a theatre.
Mm,
People put on their office hat, and they've got these sets of behaviours and norms that occur in an office environment, that are acceptable,
mhm.
and become accepted regardless of output. And it's just bizarre.
Yes. I remember back before COVID hit, I was working in an office and HR said that to one of my managers. I really didn't mind where people worked as long as you got the work done.
Hmm.
But it is a shift, it is a change. And pre-COVID, it was very difficult to get things through. And that's what HR said. Look, if she's not working here, she's probably more likely to be working from home because she's happy, she's satisfied, she's got what she wants. It's 1 day a week. Like, let's not, make too much of a big deal about this.
Yeah.
Um, But you have been leading remote teams for over 20 years.
Mhm.
What have you learned about what actually works and what gets in the way?
The main things that work or that make this work,
Mm,
I actually have a bit of a framework. So, but basically, it intentional communication is key. So
mm,
when you're in an office, you've got all those spontaneous interactions. They'd call them water cooler moments, or whatever you want to call them. But these spontaneous interactions that build relationships and build collaboration and communication, they don't occur in a remote or virtual space. So as a leader, you need to adopt practices that intentionally create those experiences, not only between yourself and your people, but between the people themselves.
yeah.
And so putting those intentional touch points in is really, really important, and reduces that sense of invisibility. And what I call them check-ins, not check-ups.
Yeah.
And because that builds trust, once your intention for communicating with someone is to check up on them,
Mm,
it's really obvious when you're working remotely. So
mm,
your means of finding out whether someone is doing their job or not, are quite overt when you're working remotely, and it's very obvious what your intentions are behind that fairly quickly.
yep.
So, we don't have that in an office environment. It's totally different, but you just need to come up with more creative and positive ways of interacting with your people and doing it on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And underlying that is trust. And trust is key to the whole remote or flexible working arrangements.
Yeah.
So I believe that if I trust people, generally they are trustworthy. Once I start to give them the message that they're not trustworthy, they start to go a bit rogue. So, you know, I I
Mm,
actually set the expectation that someone is trustworthy from the outset,
yeah.
and then we watch what happens.
Yeah.
People will show me soon enough whether they are trustworthy or not. I have ways and means of monitoring productivity and outcomes,
Mhm.
without actually looking over their shoulder and having them physically sit, 10 meters away from me.
Yeah.
Um, as a leader, you need to adopt things that are, or ways and means of monitoring outcomes
Mhm.
that don't involve the person actually sitting right in front of you.
Yeah.
And for me, people centricity is also really important. So this human centric piece that underpins why we offer flexibility.
Yeah.
So recognizing that someone is a person before they're a worker,
Mhm.
and they might have a neurotic dog that
Mhm.
they need to have looked after. They might have a parent that's aging that they need have caring responsibilities for. They may have childcare and rearing responsibilities as well. And
Mhm.
that's not to say that that is going to be their main focus every day, but having this flexibility piece interwoven with one's week
Mm,
enables people to be able to meet the responsibilities and things that they love doing
mhm.
and the things that are meaningful to them in the mix of being a professional person and
Yeah.
still producing and still earning a living and producing outcomes. And from what I've noticed, having that interwovenness of personal and professional,
Yep.
means that people are more likely to stay.
Yes.
They're very loyal to me.
Mhm.
They're motivated to do the work. When they're on, they're on.
Yep.
They're doing exactly what they need to do when they need to do it. They want to earn a living too. They have to earn a living to pay the bills, let's face it.
Yep.
So, they're the things I've learned. You've got your trust, you've got your regular intentional communication, and treating people like human beings,
Mm,
and not just a number in a system,
yep.
are key to this model. What gets in the way, obviously, is the opposite to that. Lack of trust is probably the biggest issue. Once you don't trust someone, it can go very pear-shaped.
Mhm.
That need or tendency for managers and leaders to control and micromanage,
Mhm.
and using whatever forms of technology to keep an eye on people. This big
Yeah.
brother sort of mentality, I think, is really demoralizing and quite it's counterproductive to what we want to achieve as leaders and business owners. So
Mm.
we need to come up with ways to stop doing that. Basically, yeah, slap
Yeah.
yourself on the face and stop doing that. And I think the tendency to try to lead in the same way as we do in an office environment
Mm.
doesn't work.
Mhm.
I think we fall back on what's easy and natural, and I think that's why people generally want to pull people back into the office, because they've got certain ways of leading that fit their mold and their style of leadership.
Mhm.
Once you have a remote team or a dispersed team or a asynchronous team, then it requires a different style of leadership and a different level of effort.
Yeah.
And they're the things that I think people are struggling with, and the things that actually make it a failure.
Yeah.
Mm,
Definitely. And just recollecting on one of the things I used to do as a leader in COVID is just a super simple, like people didn't feel connected. So I
yeah.
think was it about 8:30 Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning, we just have a coffee catch up. And
Yep.
as you would walk into the office, and get your coffee and say good morning. We would do that at the start of the day. If you could come, great. If you couldn't make it, that's okay too. But it was just an open invitation. And
Mm,
people really enjoyed it. Some people were still getting ready. Some people were, doing a walk. Some people wanted to use it to check in about something else. And
yep.
it was
Yep.
just a really simple way to have that there, that people felt connected, and we could have a virtual coffee instead of a real one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, like in lots of ways, because you've got that, excuse me, that little time allocated to it,
Mm.
it's got a full stop on it, and it's not something that's going to linger on to, take over an hour of your time that you should be at your desk working. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes, the virtual meeting space
Mm.
is actually a more confined, controlled meeting period, which can actually improve people's
Yeah.
capacity to get on with their jobs and get work done. So there's
Yeah.
benefits to that as well. But definitely having those intentional touch points through the week
Mm.
for team is very important,
Mhm.
because people need to. I mean, we're all human. We want that human connection. And I think there's a lot of talk in the industry of, people who are extroverts really struggle with not being in the office and all that, that sense of isolation, and that some generations feel more isolated than others. And so it sort of meets that need of having that human interaction, although it's not, you can't touch someone, it's still having
Mm.
that piece of, I know I feel energized when
Yeah.
I've had a meeting with one of my team members, or my team online, because I've had that boost of person to person interaction,
Yeah.
that I think as humans we do crave.
Definitely. And these coffee catch-ups, just for reference too, were only
Mm,
15 minutes. So
yeah,
yeah, super quick, super easy. But
yeah.
I do want to, you touched on something else, that control part, the
Mm.
technology. And it's interesting because one of the psychosocial hazards for federal, which we all should be aware of,
Mm,
it's in the Federal Code of Practice, but we should all be aware of, is intrusive surveillance. And I've seen some crazy things. I'm sure you have too.
yeah.
There's some that want to put the camera on to see if you're looking at things, and the emails and all of that sort of stuff. So there are some organizations that are clinging to that control, either using tech or, micromanagement, or trying to force people back into the office.
Mm.
Why do you think this approach fails?
Well, I think it comes back to that trust piece. I
Yeah,
think when you've got those types of monitoring systems, it shouts or screams distrust
yeah.
to your workforce. And although, you're obviously in an office environment, you've got the less obvious means of monitoring people.
Mm.
I think we need to change the metric of what we're measuring in terms of performance. And I think it's one of those things where if people are really going to focus on how many hours someone works to get an outcome versus just getting the outcome and doing a really, really good job,
Mhm.
then they're going to want to be in control of monitoring that that person is putting in their full 8 hours to achieve their outcome.
Mhm.
And so they're going to want to put in systems to ensure that they're getting their money's worth. Well, the money's worth is actually in the outcome and
Mhm.
in the way that people do their job and the professionalism that they bring and the expertise that they bring
Yeah.
and the product they produce or the service they produce and the customer relationships they foster and nurture. There are
Yep.
so many other things we should be measuring than time alone and keystrokes on a keyboard.
Yeah.
And keyboard, I can sit here and type, I can just be touching my keyboard. It doesn't mean I'm actually producing anything of any worth.
Mhm.
And I think it really diminishes the reason why we do what we do. I mean, we're here to produce in some way in order to grow a business or develop relationships and just make an
And add
impact in the
value.
world. Yeah, add
Yeah.
value. And
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not done by simply sitting at your desk looking busy.
Yes.
And until we shift the focus of what we're measuring as a sign of success or productivity,
Yeah.
then we're always going to have this tendency to want to put in these monitoring systems, which in ultimately like scream, I don't trust that you can do this
Yeah.
without me watching you. And we're treating adults like 5-year-olds.
And then wondering why they act like that.
Absolutely. And that comes back
Yep.
to my trust begets trust. Like
Mhm.
you just if you're not willing to treat people in a way that's respectful,
Mm.
then they will not respect you. And you won't get their loyalty. You won't, they'll quietly quit. And then that's another term as well. But that's exactly what will happen. And ultimately,
Mm.
they'll eventually quit because people won't continue to work for people who they don't respect.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of leaders are just, or managers, leaders, supervisors,
Mm,
they're just doing what the organization is implementing or what they've seen from their manager as well. Or they just don't know what to do. So they're kind of fumbling. And micromanagement is one of those hazards that happen when leaders aren't tooled up effectively.
mm.
What can leaders do to shift their focus from that presenteeism to productivity?
I think it's a bigger piece. There's a piece underpinning what makes someone productive.
Mm.
And what makes someone productive is being part of a really positive culture. And that involves collaboration, communication, and connection. Um, in order for people to be motivated and productive and engaged,
Yeah.
they need all the pieces of the puzzle, which don't actually include a monitoring system
Yeah.
or knowing that you're touching the keyboard how many times a minute.
Mm.
um, so I think it's again coming back to our humanness, I guess, of the things that actually motivate us as human beings, that then motivate us to then to perform.
Mm. Yep.
And for me, in my experience, my people value the fact that I trust them, that I
Yeah.
give them autonomy, that
Mhm.
I allow them flexibility to get on with their jobs, that I have the expectations. I'm clear on my expectations. There's no confusion about what the role involves and the outcome that I require from people.
Mhm.
There's a performance expectation still there. We're not throwing that out the door. We're not saying, oh, it's all warm and fuzzy and lovely, and you just go and do whatever you want with your life, and you might work 5 minutes a day and blah blah blah. No, we're not saying that at all. But what we are saying is that in order to engage and create a sustainable, flexible work system and working arrangements, there needs to be this human centricity around it, which involves effective collaboration, effective communication,
Mm.
and this effective connection. And when you put all those pieces of the puzzle together,
Yep.
then you get the desired outcome, which is motivation, engagement, productivity.
Yes.
And that's where people thrive. People want to be trusted to get on with the job.
Mhm.
Um, and so if we're going to continue to just count bums on seats, we're not going to actually achieve. a positive culture, whether we're in the office or not.
Mm,
And I think this is the other thing that I think we've fallen into the trap of, is having people in the office equating that to a positive work culture.
mm,
You, I can be just as disconnected in an office and distracted and not communicating or collaborating or doing anything of any real worth
mhm,
or adding any real value, just as easily sitting in an office as I can when I'm working from home. But if I know that my manager or my leader or my supervisor is trusting me
mhm.
to perform, but allowing me some flexibility around that, I'm more likely to deliver.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think I think we need to evolve our thinking in
Mm,
this space. And I think in lots of ways we have, but I think we're in that really messy, it's like a tug of war, really. We're just like, we want to go back to the way things were. We want to go forward, but it's easier to go back.
mm,
We don't know how to go forward. I guess my message is I'm here to help you go forward, but you have to be open to it,
yes.
and I guess see the possibilities and see the positives,
Mhm.
because it is a win-win for everyone when it works well and when it's done well.
Yes. And would you be able to share some practical steps that leaders or teams can take to create that intentional connection and
Mm,
build trust, even
mm.
when they're not under the same roof? So we can kind of end on some things that they can take home with them and start today.
Yeah, for sure. So I find what works best, and I think that there is research that supports this, that people do work better in little pods. So breaking your team up into smaller work units does work more effectively when you're working in a dispersed workforce. It is easier to catch up with people when you're working in smaller units, and whether that's in project groups or whether that's in particular teams. I align my business. I split people off into teams according to the types of services they offer. So we've got an aged care team, an NDIS team, a insurer services team, and
Mhm.
and they're those little pods that collaborate and work together in their own little ways of connecting
Mm,
remotely. We usually use Zoom. That's our platform,
yeah.
or Teams, and we have chats and we have virtual chats. Chat rooms and things. We have an internal Facebook page, which is a little bit more of an informal, funny space, I guess, where we can share humorous things and connect socially.
Yeah.
But then we also have our check-ins.
Mhm.
So yeah, whether that's a coffee catch up or whether that's a formal meeting of some point of some kind. Um, but also remembering that remote doesn't mean removed.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be in everyone's mind. And I'm always saying to people, we don't operate as islands,
Mhm.
we are a team.
Yeah.
Yes, I allow you to work from home and I encourage you to work from home because that has lots of benefits for everyone. But I do set the expectation that everyone will intentionally connect with each other.
Mm,
And that it has to come from the leader. It won't happen spontaneously. It's not an organic process. In the office, it's organic.
yeah.
When you are remote, it's intentional. And if
Mm,
you don't implement things intentionally, it won't happen because we know as humans, we just forget.
yeah.
So it's important that as a leader, we lead with that expectation,
Mhm.
and we lead in action. And I also have face to face.
Mhm.
So for me, how it works best for my business, and it's different for every business. Some people will say, well, I want people, when we need people in the office every, 1 day a week or 2 days a week, depending on what type of work they do, that might be purposeful for them. There's
Mhm.
no point dragging people on if all they're going to do is sit on Teams or Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
That's pointless. It's got to be intentional interpersonal connection.
Mm,
But I personally, for my business, it works well for us to have quarterly team meetings. So
mm,
we are physically all in the room together. Some other teams might meet monthly. It just depends on the nature of your business and the needs that exist there. But for us, it works well to meet quarterly. And that's when we get together for team building.
mhm.
We have CPD, compulsory professional development opportunities, guest speakers,
Mhm.
product things, that updating our knowledge on evidence-based practice. So and we have fun in the room, we have lunch, and it's an opportunity for me to disseminate information about business and where we're heading and marketing and all the things that are happening at a higher level. So um, yeah, they're the things that I use in my business, and that I encourage other businesses to set up for themselves for whatever their business needs are.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and insights. I know that you've shared some incredible resources as well, so I'll add them
Yes.
to the show notes. But if someone wants to connect with you, what's the
Hmm.
best way to get in touch and learn more?
My playground is LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and that I think there's be a link in the show notes as well for me for LinkedIn. You can get in touch by looking at my website, remoteteamqueen.com.au. You can download my white paper. You can connect with me there. You can book in a Remote Team Queen quick shot, which is just a very quick chat, no obligation.
Mhm.
You can pick my brain for 20 minutes and you may never see me, you never want to see me again. Or, you might decide that you want to connect a little bit more formally or in a structured way, whether through mentoring, whether it's through workplace training sessions,
Mhm.
whether it's through speaking. However, I can help is how I'm happy to assist.
Fantastic.
Hmm.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it and love diving into this topic.
Thanks, Nicole. It's been a pleasure.
For listeners, if you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and share it. And we'll see you next time on Under the Rug at Work, where we continue to shine light on issues that are too often overlooked.